What's going on, everybody? Welcome into a early afternoon edition or late morning edition of the Sunbelt Syndicate. We are going to go over the Sunbelt versus MAC Part 2 challenge. Zach, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong here. No one else is doing like a second half of a challenge throughout the regular season, are they?
No. I mean, we always have like the ACC, whatever SEC challenge, but I feel like that's only ever been only one leg. I've never seen a two-leg challenge.
Yeah. I love this for mid-major, like a resume builder. Obviously, there's some games that are going to be lesser than because both teams are down, but looking through this, there's a ton of matchups that statistically the teams are really, really even. So that's kind of the fun part of how they've paired these two teams together on this Saturday. And as a reminder, these will all be hosted by the Sunbelt this round. They were all at the MAC opponents to start with in the early part of the year. I'm guessing that's mostly because they want that less winter aspect for a lot of the MAC schools that are probably dealing with some snow and ice and cold temperatures this time of year, right, Zach?
Well, last year the Sunbelt hosted the opening day games and the MAC hosted the games in February. So then they switched it this year. So I assume if they do it again next year, it'll be switched again where Sunbelt will host opening day.
Gotcha. That makes a good point. That's a good point. Well, yeah, they lucked out this year, but although I don't know, what's it like down there in Conway right now? Is it still pretty cold or is it actually warm up?
No, it is a high of 47 and it's already 46.
Okay.
So I mean,
so pretty chilly for you guys.
It's warmed up a little bit, but yeah, for Conway, it's still really cold.
Yeah, makes sense. We got resident Red Wolves fan Ben James jumping on saying he's going to be in attendance for A-State versus Bowling Green. That one should be a really good matchup today. Zach, you're going to be in attendance for one of these games as well, right?
Yep, Coastal and UMass.
Nice. All right. Well, without further ado, let's get further into this thing. Zach, talk to us a little bit about how this thing started off. It wasn't a very good start. Let's say that, right?
Yeah, MAC won nine games. A lot of them were dominant wins too. There were a few games that could have went either way. Maybe should have went the Sunbelt way, but yeah, really rough start for the Sunbelt this year.
Yeah, I know that it was not pretty. Hopefully we can flip that around. Do you think a large aspect of that was the teams hosting at their spot in the early part of the season? Like, was that a big component of maybe why the MAC was so dominant in the first round and we'll see it kind of flip today? Or do you think it'll still be kind of a little more even, or if the MAC is just more powerful this year?
I mean, I think last year the Sunbelt won most of the opening day games at home. I think it's just hard to win on the road on opening day, but especially like at the mid-major level where a bunch of people don't know their teams.
True. That's a good point. And as we've discussed a couple times, and if anyone from the MAC aspect is watching or joining the show, the Sunbelt, quite frankly, got decimated after last year with a lot of the talented players. Not everybody left, but a lot of the first, second, and third team guys after the season was over have all been moved on for either graduation or in the transfer portal. So a lot of these teams maybe didn't know what they had and weren't firing on all cylinders to start the season, which makes sense. I mean, it's probably same true of the MAC. Obviously, Zach and I don't know, the ins and outs of the MAC quite as well, but I would say historically the MAC is a better conference overall in basketball, right?
Yeah, historically for sure. I mean, maybe over the last few years it's leaned towards the Sunbelt, but historically, and then especially this year, I think too, it's definitely leaned towards the MAC.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a 6-7 joke or if someone thinks that the record's going to go more 6-7, but I would assume it's the joke. But anyway, hopefully the Sunbelt can turn this thing around today. Before they do that, let's take a look at the current standings. Troy was up there all by themselves, 2 weeks ago, Zach? I mean, I know that there were some teams close, but they've dropped a couple games, and App State is now right there, I guess like half game behind them. Got two teams tied at 7-4 in South Alabama and Marshall. What do you make of the standings as we go into this second part of the MAC Challenge?
I mean, it's still pretty crazy, right? I mean, you look from Troy all the way down to Georgia State. There's only a 3-game difference, so it's going to be a crazy finish of the year, especially after this challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that it's crazy, obviously, these conference standings won't change after this weekend's games, but for the most part, you've got the teams with the better overall records over there on that left side. As we know, no East-West in the Sun Belt basketball standings like we have for football. But you've got the Cajuns now sticking out. They're now a 6-6 team. They're just 8-16 overall, though. Do you think the Cajuns have kind of found their stride after early season struggles and injuries? Like, is this a team that may stay towards that top 7, or did they get kind of a good portion of the schedule where they're taking advantage of some teams that are down below them, as they just did with, James Madison a little while ago?
I mean, they're on a 3-game winning streak, and it's kind of weird because they've gotten better after that freshman got injured for the year, which is kind of weird. But I mean, I haven't taken a look at the rest of their schedule, but I know they play Coastal next week. But you just got to play who's ahead of you, and right now they're on a roll.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely on a roll. Looking more, talented and impressive than they did in the early part of the season. They started off very poorly, so it's good to see them make a run and also make this a little more exciting at this point of the year. Sam's got a question. Marshall over Ohio, Miami of Ohio, would be a bigger upset than Portland over Gonzaga? Ooh, that's a good question. I'm going to save that. Let's table that, Zach. Just think about that for a minute, and we'll get to that when we get to the game-specific matchups. We do have the MAC standings as well, but before we get into that, I want to actually jump over to the standings as they looked last year at this time for the Sun Belt, because I want to see this vast difference here real quick. As you can see, last year at this time, James Madison was leading the pack at 11-4 in the conference, 19-9 overall. South Alabama still up there at the top as they are this year. Same with Troy. Arkansas State was very good at this point last year. Marshall still in relatively the same spot. App State's actually outperforming what they did at this time last year. And then I guess the only team over on that right side, as we see it, that's a little better, well, a lot better, is your Chants, your Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, man. Really big turnaround from last season. You kind of expected that, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, I thought they'd be better. I didn't know they'd be this much better.
Yeah. But just a pretty good improvement there. A lot more enjoyable to watch what they've done so far this year. I just thought it was an interesting dynamic of how some of these teams have flipped. James Madison was at the top. Now they're really sitting there close to the bottom. Unfortunately for ULM, they're in the exact same spot this year as they were last year, which is the very bottom of the conference. We'll see if they can pull off a game today. And then jumping over to the MAC standings, just so we have a look about who's hot and who's not in the other conference as we come into these matchups. You've got an undefeated team. Quite frankly, they're the number 23 ranked team in the country with Miami of Ohio. So as Sam has just asked, would Marshall over them be a bigger upset? I said we're going to save it. Let's go ahead and talk about that now, Zach. It looked like you were shaking your head no. I'd probably agree with you, but let's hear your thoughts on if Marshall could upset Miami of Ohio, would it be bigger than Portland over Gonzaga?
Well, Gonzaga is, like a perennial top 10 team in the country. They're not like this mid-major team on a magical run. They're a team that you kind of expect to be up towards the top of the country every year, and they have the talent of a Power 5 level team versus Miami, who's, they're 23-0, but they're definitely a lot less talented in terms of just like a pure talent wise. And then they're going on the road to Marshall, which is, in my opinion, probably a harder place to play than, I believe Gonzaga lost at Portland. I believe Marshall's probably a harder place to play than Portland is.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I don't know the ins and outs of Portland basketball, but I do agree with you. This Gonzaga program, I mean, technically still listed as a mid-major, but Zach, you probably know this too. Like this Zags program, they don't have a football program that's competing on the money aspect for this. So they pump their money and their time and their efforts into basketball. This is a team that's been flying private to all of their games for years. So yes, they're mid-major in some respect because of the rest of their conference, but this is a team that's handled and performed like a major program for many, many years. So I would say Portland over Gonzaga, a bigger upset than Marshall over Miami. The other aspect of this is like Miami and Marshall, have some history. They're not terribly far apart as far as location is concerned. So this one's going to be one that the Thunder and Herd fans are going to be greatly up for and excited for today. I hope they pack the barn. I think it's already been announced to sell out, Zach. Is that what you saw too?
I haven't seen anything. I didn't look. But also in conference play, I think you kind of expect to lose like maybe one or two that you don't expect, which Gonzaga did.
True. Good point. And if you really look, as you were saying, with Miami of Ohio here, you look at their schedule and obviously they've got some good wins. They've squeaked by a few teams and they really don't have that really big win.
I think
right. No one's sticking out, right?
I think their KenPom strength of schedule is like towards the bottom of the country. I think it's like 320 something.
Okay. That's not surprising with what I'm looking at here. I mean, you got Mercyhurst, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Air Force, Maine.
I mean, they're still a good and fun team to watch, but don't get me wrong. But their strength of schedule is definitely towards the bottom.
Yeah, not up there with the best of them. A team that's almost always good in the MAC as well. Akron sits at 10-1 in conference, 19-4 overall. So another really strong, powerful team out of the Zips. I mean, I feel like I didn't quite go through the thing of bringing up the MAC's conference standings from last season as I did with the Sun Belt because, our focus here is the Sun Belt. So I didn't quite do the same with the MAC. But I believe Akron was right at the top, last year for the MAC. Is that kind of ringing true to you as well, Zach?
Yeah, Akron, Kent State. I feel like Toledo's usually up there, even though they're not having the greatest year this year. Those three teams I feel like are always towards the top half of the conference.
Yeah, makes sense. And then you've got UMass, who wasn't involved in the MAC or this challenge last year, who's come in, and they're in the top half of the MAC standings as well. Just took Miami of Ohio to overtime, right? Was it overtime or just a close finish? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
I think the UMass game was just a close finish, but Miami has been in a few overtimes and close games lately.
Yeah, they definitely have. And like you said, that's kind of what makes them fun to watch, right? Like, okay, we don't dominate everybody, but that actually makes going to games or watching games on TV more enjoyable. Is there any team maybe over on the other side of the standings for the MAC's purpose that's surprising to you that they're not as good this year? I mean, maybe, I don't know if Buffalo maybe sticking out to me a little bit, maybe expected a little bit better from Buffalo this time around, but either them or somebody else you're looking at?
Yeah, Buffalo, they started out, I think, like 8-0 this year. And they beat Southern Miss, and they beat, I think, DePaul. So that's kind of surprising. I mean, Western Michigan, they beat Coastal on opening night. And it's a game that Coastal probably should have won. Just too many turnovers. And just to see them at 2-8, 8-14 overall is kind of a little bit surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam saying Miami and Ohio got moved to ESPN. Could be another close one. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think the Buffalo teams played Miami of Ohio twice now, and both games were extremely close as well. So, like you said, a team that's sitting at 14-9 as well, overall great record, but just 4-7 in conference is kind of the surprising part. So that's why these conference games are so important. And we know, again, this day today isn't going to be affecting the conference standings, but just an interesting aspect that wanted to take a look at where some of these teams sit as we get into some of these specific matchups. And we'll go ahead and dive into them now a little bit more specifically. The first tip being at 1 p.m. today, or 12 Central Time, as a lot of our teams in the Sun Belt are in that Central Time zone. But that first one is Eastern Michigan going up against App State. Eastern Michigan 9-14, App State sitting at 16-9. But again, looking at these games just as the record is concerned, you think, oh, App clearly going to win this one. Well, hopefully for the Sun Belt aspect, and as I'm wearing the little zip up here of App State, they'll take it at home. But statistically speaking, both of these teams actually fairly close. I would say that App has the better defense. If you're looking at the team stats, Eastern Michigan also losers of their last 5. On the opposite end of that, App State has won their last 5, which is their longest win streak of the season. They're allowing opponents to score just an average of 53 points in those last 5 games. Eastern Michigan's average points scored for the season is right about 71, which is actually the same as App State's. Again, these teams statistically pretty close, but I think you're going to see a hot team coming up against a team that's not so hot. I would expect App State to win this one. Any quick thoughts from you on this one specifically, Zach?
I mean, just in general, I think they choose the matchups based off, like, they do like analytics and stuff and try to get like the closest comparisons of teams. And they obviously, you have to do it like a month in advance or whenever they announced it. So maybe at the time this was the right game to play, but App State should definitely win this one.
Yeah, I don't know if Sam's saying App by 50. I'm not sure we're going to see that. I'd be okay with it. But App State has to be shooting well too, right? They've had some games where they don't shoot as well. Luckily, their defense has brought them up in the games where they haven't shot as well. South Alabama being one of those, Zach. I know you always talk about South Alabama's strange zone defensive setup. And App in that first half was not hitting from outside. They definitely need those types of shots to land if they want to win comfortably today. And we'll talk about South Alabama here in a few minutes as well. Next matchup, Zach, you take the reins in this one because this is the game you'll be at. UMass going down to Conway today.
Yeah. Coastal, they had won 5 of 6, and then now they just lost a kind of like a heartbreak to Arkansas State, a game they definitely would like back. And then UMass, they've been playing well lately. Barely lost to Miami, Ohio, so it should be a fun one. Coastal, I think, just for Coastal at least, they got to keep the turnovers down. Just they had 16 last game. I think Beetle had 9, and that was kind of the story of the game late in the game against Arkansas State. Why they blew a 7-point lead pretty late was just turnovers, and then they also just have to shoot the ball well. They're a pretty up and down team shooting, but if they're on shooting, they're going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope they can take that one there. The overall records, just to make note of that. UMass sitting at 15-9, and Coastal sitting at 14-11. But again, statistically speaking, both of these teams fairly close. This is one of those matchups that worked out pretty well with the overall records at the time of when they made it. Like you said, kind of before they are about to happen. They need to give both of these teams time to get everything in order. Mostly the team that's going on the road, I guess. But yeah. Sam wants to know if we'd rather this challenge be flex scheduled so you get better matchups. Well,
it kind of
exactly
is.
Like you said, it is. Yeah. It's just you do have to have a little bit of time so that they can coordinate their travel plans. So it doesn't necessarily work out when you try and do those 2 or 3 weeks out. Someone could go on a hot streak, someone can go on a cold streak, and then you get a matchup that doesn't look as good as when you made it on paper. Some of them have still worked out to be really good for today, though. So, and just to note, App State versus Eastern Michigan is on ESPN Plus, as is this UMass versus Coastal Carolina. Most of these games will be on ESPN Plus today if you are looking for them. But hopefully, as we are a Sunbelt podcast, hopefully most of our fans are going to be headed to most of these games. And also, if you haven't already, Zach has written an excellent article about the top matchups in today's games over on syndicatelsports.io. That's right. We've changed the Sunbelt Syndicate website name because we are hoping to branch out and further collect more conferences to come in and be a part of what we're trying to do. But for right now, we're obviously still Sunbelt specific, but the website name has changed to syndicatelsports.io. Great article over there from Zach, so be sure to check that one out. And other articles from some of our other writers as well, including weekly previews and recaps on the basketball side. Also, baseball will have some coverage going forward. All right, this first game at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, Pitts NIU and Georgia State. NIU comes in 7-14. Georgia State sits at 9-15. Georgia State 3-game skid right now, so that's not great coming into this matchup. However, in a good aspect for them, NIU comes in just 2-3 in their last 5, so it's not necessarily a hot versus cold matchup as we saw with App versus EMU in that one. NIU has a great 3-point shooter that's going to be on the court today, so definitely be on the lookout for. And Dylan Ducommun, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's spelled Ducommun. So we'll go with Dylan. But that's an aspect that the Panthers defense will definitely have to be on the lookout for. Maybe a little double team action to shut him down early and take him out of the game. But Georgia State counters with the best average score in conference play in Jelani Hamilton, who's scoring about 18 points per game. Zach, any notes or anything you might expect to see out of this one?
I mean, hopefully this could be a get-right game for Georgia State, who's kind of been playing bad lately.
Yeah, and they've had some good performances, but again, that 3-game skid for them, I think, just 2 weeks ago, they were sitting at second place in our conference. So those 3 games have been vitally important. And again, they won't gain any ground in the conference with a win today, but like you said, get-right game, hopefully get them back to that performance level they were at before a couple games ago. All right, Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 Central Time, Western Michigan traveling down to San Marcos to play Texas State. The Broncos come in at 18-4 overall. Not great. Texas State counters with a 14-11 record. This one is kind of the hot versus cold matchup. And luckily for the Sun Belt, the Western Michigan Broncos come in at just 1-4 in their last 5. Not a whole lot of stuff statistically that sticks out and makes you think that they're one of the better teams in this challenge. Luckily for Texas State, they are on a 3-game win streak, and Caden Gums plays some pretty strong defense on that back end and hopefully can counter with the Bobcats victory in this one. This will be the Bobcats' last MAC versus Sunbelt challenge, right, Zach?
Yep, moving to the Pac-12 next year. But it should be a good one because they're facing a pretty rough Western Michigan team.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully they can garner us a victory and help flip that 9-4 overall record we had after round 1 here. Okay, another game tipping off at the same time. Pitt's Kent State at 17-6 versus Southern Miss at just 12-13. I'm going to start off with you, Zach, on this one. Just a quick thought. This Southern Miss team kind of been a little hot and cold, I feel like, and they've done this the past several seasons. And then they're going to play this Kent State team that's pretty dang good up at the top of the MAC, kind of routinely, and obviously again this year with that 17-6 record. Is this one going to be competitive, I guess, is kind of my big question mark. Kent State, the pretty heavy favorite coming in.
It definitely could be. Like you said, Southern Miss is kind of a weird team. They'll play a pretty bad team and lose by a lot, and then they played South Carolina and lost in overtime in a game they should have won. So, like you said, they're a hot goal team, and then Kent State, routinely one of the top mid-major teams in the country. They have a big man who's averaging, I think he's leading the country in rebounds, but he's only 6'8". So that's going to be a tough matchup for him, but Kent State definitely should be the favorite, but I could definitely see this being a close one.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the rebounds. Yeah, Delreco Gillespie looks like that player from Kent State that you just referenced, easily leading the MAC with 12 rebounds per game. That's crazy. The second place guy in the MAC actually plays for Eastern Michigan, a team we already talked about, just at 8.1, which is still pretty good. But you're averaging 12 points or 12 rebounds a game, definitely sticking out. And also, Kent State, talking about playing pretty well. They just took undefeated Miami of Ohio, to overtime. So this team is no slouch, no joke. But maybe, that long travel down to southern Mississippi, plays a little bit of an evening factor for this one. At least that's what we hope. Sam thinks Kent State takes this one by 51. He's with these large scoring margin differences today. We'll see if that holds true, but hopefully not for our sake. All right, I've got my Warhawks hat on here. I've tried to represent as many Sunbelt teams as I could here today. Ball State and ULM Warhawks matching up at 3 Eastern, 2 Central time. Ball State 7-15 overall. ULM 4-20 overall. ULM does have their first conference victory here as of late. This is, let's be honest, this is one that's probably not going to have a lot of eyes on it, right, Zach? I mean, these two teams both struggling pretty well, but I don't know if you've got any real fast thoughts on this specific matchup in this one.
I mean, ULM has been playing better lately. They just beat Old Dominion. They had a close one against Coastal. I think the game before that, I forget who they played, but that was another really close one. Georgia Southern, it was. That was a close one. Yep. So, I mean, maybe ULM keeps it rolling a little bit. But, yeah, this is a game that I don't think a lot of people are going to be wanting to tune into.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Sam thinks this one is. He thinks this one's going to be close. Ball State by 12, which in basketball, 12 not necessarily that close of a game. But I really hope that long distance travel for Ball State down to Louisiana plays a little bit of a factor in this one, and ULM can kind of continue playing a little bit better, as you mentioned. He's also mentioning that he didn't draft any of our conferences in this show, in our Bourbon Beer and Basketball show, where we drafted basketball conferences. Kind of a fun thing that we did this last Wednesday. Be sure to check that show out as well. We usually air it on our platform at the same time, so definitely be on the lookout for that. And we cover the whole thing of college basketball. We're going to get Zach on there at some point too, because he is an all-knowing basketball guy. That's why he does this show. And another game at the same time, again, in Bowling Green versus Arkansas State. 14-9 Bowling Green, 14-10 Arkansas State. I know you had this one listed as one of your games to watch. Didn't necessarily have a ton of notes on this one, but is there anything that sticks out to you immediately between these two teams here?
Yeah, I kind of picked 3 games, and then I picked a few honorable mentions, and this was kind of in my honorable mention. Just a pretty evenly matched game. I think Arkansas State, they started out the season really, really strong, and in conference play they've kind of tanked a little bit, but they're coming off a win. So let's see if they keep that going.
Yeah, I think Arkansas State's got some Jalen Hampton's pretty good on the defensive end of the court, and then you've got Javonte Campbell over for Bowling Green, one of the top scorers in the MAC. So that's going to be, like you said, kind of one of those aspects, like who has a little bit better of a game there. And this one, again, in Jonesboro. So hopefully we can see a close, fun game. This one's going to be one that you do want to have your eyes tuned into. Sam saying Arkansas State by 5 in this one. Then, Zach, Arkansas State, if they got the attendance that they want, they're going to have that place jumping pretty good for this basketball game. So hopefully that plays pretty good to their advantage in this one. All right. It's the one that most people are talking about. Everyone's got their eyes on between both conferences here because you've got a nationally ranked team in Miami of Ohio, 23-0, going into a crazy atmosphere that will be as the Marshall Thundering Herd host them. Sitting at 15-8, no slouches overall. Pretty good team on the home aspect. And I'm going to try and pull up their overall home record. But I've had a couple people ask me, could the Herd pull the upset in this one? And I think it's very realistic that they could, Zach. What are you seeing in this one?
Yeah, I think they definitely could. But Miami, they average like 17 plus assists a game, which is nuts. And then I also saw they shoot over 50% from the field, and then they shoot about 40% from three, which are both like top 5 in the country. So they're just a team that doesn't miss. But Marshall, they also provide some matchup problems with Van Komen, who's 7'4". They got Wyatt Fricks, who's like a 7 foot. He's 6'10", but he's like an athletic guard almost. So, I mean, it definitely can be close.
Yeah, and you also in your article wrote about 6 players in double figures, but you did have a note for everyone on that, right?
Yeah, one of them has been out since December, but still 5 guys in double figures is still really impressive.
Yeah, I asked this Wednesday night to a guy who does coaching at the high school level, and I'll ask you this too because you are much better versed in the basketball aspect, and I want to know your thoughts on this. 5 players that are going to be on the court that average double figures, 6 overall, though. They're all really close to each other. There's not a guy who scores 20 plus and then the next closest guy is at 11 or 12. They're all within that 15, 14, 12, aspect. Is that good or bad that you don't have some guy that can just completely take over and dominate a game in this type of situation maybe? Or is it better to have 5 or 6 guys that are kind of evenly, scoring the ball? I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it depends. It depends. Well, first of all, just the 5 guys are good. But it does provide kind of a scouting problem where you have to worry about 5 guys instead of maybe like 1 or 2. But it also, like, if you have like a superstar that can get you 20 on any given night, that he can win you any game. Which, if you have 5 guys that average around like 12 points a game, you might not be able to. If a game gets close and you need a guy to like kind of take over the game, it might be a little harder to find.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then hopefully, like you said, those tall, lengthy guys on the back end for Marshall can force them to take shots from outside, and maybe they're a little cold today, on the road. We'll see what happens. To note, the one I did want to bring up here, I think I have it here, Marshall 11-2 at home this season. So very good record at home. They're going to be up for this game. The place is going to be going bonkers. Sam thinks this is crazy close. Miami of Ohio by 2 in 4 overtimes. That's quite the prediction. We'll see if it holds true. If it does, this one might take center stage Sunday morning on ESPN for some replay because that would be quite the finish to that one. Moving on to the next game. Again, same tip time. Buffalo Bulls 14-9, traveling down to Mobile to play South Alabama at 16-7. This is another one of your games to watch, right, Zach?
Yep. South Alabama has Chase Harris, who's one of the top scorers in the Sun Belt, but he doesn't do it from behind the arc. I think he's like 1 for last time, or at least when they played Coastal, he's like 1 for 17 from 3. So he's a guard that just kind of wants to get in the lane. But then they have on the back end, they have Adam Olson, who's a stretch big. So, and then Buffalo, they got a few like high-level scoring guards, and they're going to have to score because South Alabama, like you said, they play that weird zone that kind of no other team in the country runs, and they force the most threes in the country by far. It's not even close. I think they put up a graphic during the Coastal game where they force teams to shoot like 43s a game, and the next closest is like 32. So they want you to shoot, like, which is kind of crazy. But if you get hot, they're gonna have a hard time beating you. So it all depends how you do shooting the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a good point that you've made that makes Sam turn his thoughts around too. 2 weeks ago, he says he would have picked Buffalo, but he says gives me USA, USA, USA by 16. Maybe that's part of the Winter Olympics starting up. Get that USA fever going on, which we'll side with for multiple reasons. One being that is South Alabama's shortened nickname, and we've got those Winter Olympics rolling as well. So we'll see what happens there. Hopefully goes our way down in Mobile. Okay, and then Saturday, same tip time again. We've got Central Michigan 7-16, against the Ragin' Cajuns, the up-and-coming maybe Ragin' Cajuns at 8-16. So again, overall records makes this game look very close. The Cajuns winning their last 3 coming in, and some of those teams have been some of the better ones. At the time, Georgia State was a pretty big win for them. Then they get by Georgia Southern, and then they take out James Madison, which we've said not quite as good this year as they have been in the past. But Central Michigan got some victories over there, but they are just 2-3 in their last 5. I don't know. Is there any notes on the Chippewas or Cajuns you want to mention in going into this one?
No, like you said, just Louisiana. Despite injuries, they've gotten better after the injuries, and they're on a 3-game winning streak.
Yep. We'll see if they can keep it rolling, keep those Cajuns hot. That's a terrible reference, but let's see if they can do that. All right. Again, same tip time at Toledo Rockets, 12-11 against James Madison, 11-13. Really a rematch from last year here, Zach, in this one. But both teams not quite where they were at this time last year. Maybe one that a lot of people would have tuned into had both teams been good, because historically, over the last few years at least, they have been. I don't know. This one should be very evenly matched, though, even though it's not necessarily the better teams, right?
Yeah, pretty evenly matched, even though it's not the Toledo and the JMU that we're used to.
Absolutely agree. Hopefully, James Madison has had some games where they've looked pretty good, though. It's just not uber consistent this year for whatever reason. Sam's taking Toledo by 7 in that one. Hopefully he's wrong, because we'd like to see the guys from Harrisonburg take that one. All right, Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 Central. This one on ESPN2. This is Akron versus Troy. Akron, the Zips at 19-4. Troy, 16-8. But again, just a couple days ago, really, this Troy team looking a lot better in that overall record. What do you expect to see in this one?
Another pretty close game. Will be interesting to see the atmosphere. I know, despite Troy being pretty good, I feel like their atmospheres usually aren't the greatest. But they got Thomas Dowd and Victor Valdez, both some of the top scorers in the Sun Belt. Akron has Tavari Johnson, who leads the MAC over 20 a game, and has had multiple 30-point games this year. And then it could be a high-scoring one, because both teams are at or near the top of their conference in scoring.
Yeah, this is one that I'm glad got elevated. It is interesting to see Miami of Ohio not be that one that they put up, but this one is going to be a good game on that aspect. So definitely tune into that one. The Trojans are no joke. They were our representative. Again, for anybody that's on the outside, not as familiar with the Sun Belt, the Trojans were the Sun Belt representative for the NCAA tournament last year. And we're looking like the easy odds-on favorite towards the earlier part of the year. And then they've gone through a little bit of a slump here. Let's see if they can get back on track against a good Zips team. Troy by 13. Sam's prediction in this one. That would be quite a bit. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. I'd love to see it, because, again, we've got one conference versus another. I don't feel bad if we sweep them. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. All right, this is the last matchup, because Zach's got to get going and headed towards the arena. We've got Saturday, 7 Eastern, 6 Central. Ohio, not Miami, Ohio this time. The Ohio Bobcats, 13-11 versus ODU, who sits at just 7-17. But Zach, when I was looking at the statistics for this may be the closest statistical matchup of the entire day. If you go down the team comparison, they're scoring around the same amount. They're allowing around the same amount. Field goal percentage is very similar. Both teams rebound very well. I mean, just everything. The blocks are around the same. Steals are about the same. The only difference that you can see coming in is that Old Dominion's lost their last 2 and Ohio's won their last 2. Is this going to still be like one team's a little bit hotter right now and one team's a little colder? Or do you expect this one to be a battle right down to the very end?
It should be a game that Ohio wins, but like ODU was kind of towards the top at the beginning of the season for me, prediction wise, because I thought the talent they brought in was just so like elite, and it's kind of just hasn't played out that way. But I'm not giving up on Old Dominion just because, like I said, I think if you just look on paper, their talent is just so good that I think it can keep them in any game. But they've also proven this year that they can lose any game. So should be a fun one. I think Ohio probably should win, but it's at Old Dominion, who traditionally has a good crowd and a good atmosphere, no matter their record.
I agree with you on that. That could be the ultimate evening point there. Shaw, who's gone off for some crazy point totals. I think a week or 2 ago he had 34 or something like that. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see him go up against Pavelski over on the Ohio side, who's a really good shooter for them. Sam's taking Ohio. It looks like I'm sorry. He says Ohio will have their elevated matchup against Miami of Ohio on their mind. So he says give him ODU by 8. I love it. I love that prediction. I love that that's how we wrap it up with a predicted Sun Belt victory. Zach, thanks very much for getting on here and going over these matchups before today's matchup begin or tip off. Any last news or notes you want to share before you head towards the arena?
No, I mean, I think hopefully it's a good day for the Sun Belt, right?
Yes.
They had that tough opening night, but it's hard to win on the road, definitely, and hopefully they take advantage of the home court atmospheres.
Yes, I agree. I really hope that happens. Hopefully people are on their way there or about to leave and get there to fill up some of these arenas and bring that home crowd energy that we're going to need in order to take some of these matchups today. Thanks for joining us. A different time and place than we're usually going live from, but we really appreciate everyone jumping on, sharing the comments and predictions, and hopefully the Sun Belt can get the right side of the overall record after this second round goes through. See you guys later.